So what I want to do, I was gonna have someone read it because I thought I was gonna be driving, but I actually still want to have someone read it. So does someone want to just read the story for us? Just straight up read it over.
A prince, the turkey prince. A prince once became mad and thought that he was a turkey. He felt compelled to sit naked under the table, pecking at bones and pieces of bread like a turkey. All the royal physicians gave up hope of curing him of this madness. The king grieved tremendously. A sage arrived and said, I will undertake to cure him. The sage undressed and sat naked under the table, next to the prince, picking at crumbs and bones. Who are you? Asked the prince. What are you doing here? And you, replied the sage, what are you doing here? I am a turkey, said the prince. I am also a turkey, answered the sage. They sat together like this for some time, until they became good friends. One day, the sage signaled the king's servants to throw him shirts. And he said to the prince, what makes you think that a turkey can't wear a shirt? You can wear a shirt and still be a turkey. With that, the two of them put on shirts. After a while, the sage again signaled, and they threw him. As before, he asked, what makes you think that you can't be a turkey if you wear pants? The sage continued in this manner until they were both completely dressed. Then he signaled for regular food from the table. The sage then asked the prince, what makes you think that you will stop being a turkey if you eat good food? You can eat whatever you want and still be a turkey. They both ate the food. Finally, the sage said, what makes you think a turkey must sit under the table? Even a turkey can sit at the table. The sage continued in this manner until the prince was completely cured.
Shkaya, thank you, Andrew, for that beautiful reading.
Thank you.
As you may have all realized, this is a story from Rav Nachman. Now, Rav Nachman had a lot of teachings that he taught through stories. I'd say a pretty trademark characteristic of the teachings, that a lot of them are stories like this. And this story in particular is interesting because it's actually its origin is not Jewish. It's a old Mesopotamian type of fable that dates back pre-Reb Nachman. But he actually uses it and makes subtle adaptations to kind of bring out a certain message, or many messages. Really, there's a lot of different ways to understand this story, and there's a lot of different lessons to take from here. But one thing that Rav Nachman changes in particular is right at the end of the story, when he changes. So here we have the sage continued in this manner until the prince was completely cured, as Andrew just read. But originally, it said they continued in this manner until the prince sat at the table. Okay, so it seems pretty subtle, but why the change? Like, what is Rav Nachman trying to teach us? What is he trying to tell us with that change? Clearly, that he thinks he's completely cured by the end, or something about the fact that by the end of this whole process, he's completely cured. And then the question is he completely cured, right? Because it would almost seem to make sense to say they continued in this manner until he was at the table. Because, yeah, I'm going to open this up now. Like, what do we think? Is he completely cured? I don't know if I'm going to get a lot of responses here just based on how these go. And if anyone is just joining, I hope you can still see the story that is up on the screen, but we just read through that. And the question is this prince completely cured? He started off, he wouldn't sit at the table, he's going onto the table, he's acting like a turkey, pecking at crumbs and bones, and by the end, he's convinced that he can also sit at the table. But is he cured? Anyone? And I know Jacob's...
No, it doesn't say. It doesn't say at the end of the story. I don't know.
I know Jacob's going to bail me out. Yeah, I knew you would say something. Someone else started to say something. Who had an idea?
It was also me. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess he's like physically doing the things that make him normal, but is he all the way okay in his head, perhaps?
There you go. Yeah, so that's what bothered me, because it definitely seems like he still thinks he's a turkey, right? For all intents and purposes, like he's just a turkey who has now been trained to do other stuff. So is that cured? Well, Rav Nachman seems to think so, right? even though he's just a turkey who acts like a prince now. But Rav Nachman is trying to tell us something, that he seems to think that is cured. So everyone else, minus the sage, seems to think the problem is that he thinks it's a turkey, right? That's the madness. But the royal physician comes, and what does he say? It says all the sages attempted to cure him of this madness, but the royal physician. So then the sage comes, I'll undertake to cure him, right? He doesn't say any mention of this madness, the madness being that he thinks it's a turkey, right? He doesn't say anything of that. I'm just going to cure him. So the sage clearly thinks there's something else that's wrong here. So let's back up. What would happen if there was a turkey? I don't know where all you guys are sitting. I assume you're all in rooms or in cars or whatever, or outside. But what would happen if you brought a turkey into let's say the dining room, because they're at a dining room table, I guess. So what would happen if you brought a turkey into the dining room? What would it do? I need participation for this one. Just blurt out any ideas. What would a turkey do?
Gobble.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Andrew. What else?
Run around in circles.
Run around in circles. Thank you, Jacob. Anyone else? What do we got?
Disrupt dinner.
Yes, it would just do crazy things. Thank you, Yona. But the point that I'm getting at is that what it probably wouldn't do is that it wouldn't feel compelled to sit under the table, because compulsion, as I'm understanding it, is kind of more of a human thing, but also it wouldn't feel like Dafka, I need to just like stay under this table, right? It would just do whatever it wants because it's a turkey. And so that's the first thing that I'm noticing at the story, or about his actions are a little strange. Now let's go back to the prince a little bit. What do we know about him? Do we have any info about his background? Maybe Andrew's story had a little bit, that he was living with his mother and father, but at least in this Girsa, this version, and I imagine in that one too, there's probably not so much, context about him, how he grew up, what he looks like, what his name is, anything about it. We don't have much about him. All we know is that he's a prince, right? So what's a prince's life like? Let's participation again. Anyone have ideas? What is it like to be a prince in a royal palace?
You have to live up to like what your parents want you to be. You don't really have choice. Yes,
that is very true. You have a very set, I guess, career path, I guess, lifestyle path. There's not a lot of flexibility. There's not a lot of choice in what you do. You're very much, I guess, compelled to do everything. There's a lot of, royal dinner time is at 6:30 or whatever, and royal lunchtime is at whatever, and there's meetings you have to go to, whatever it is. You're not really making your own schedule. You can't really just go to, I don't know.
It kind of reminds me of being Jewish.
Oh, does it?
Yeah. I mean, you have to like wake up and then daven, and then like davening set times, and like you want to do something, and then you got the little voice inside you that's like, you could be doing this, or you could just be studying Torah.
So yeah, there's definitely some parallels though there. We'll keep exploring that. But he's very compelled, and it's just, I guess, also like Judaism, he's just born into it, right? His father's the king. It's a lot of like, do this because I said so, because I'm the king, and there's not a lot of free choice for him. He has a life that he kind of has to follow this path. And let's just say the prince, the reason he goes mad, we're just kind of drawing storyline here, is because he doesn't want this compulsion anymore. He doesn't want to live this structured life, and he goes crazy, and he wants to be the least prince-like thing that he can be. And for him, what he comes up with is a turkey. He's like, I'm gonna be a turkey. I'm gonna be an anti-prince. I don't want any part of this. I want the least structure possible. I want to get out of this. Okay, so we talked about that a little bit, but now this is a very important point. Let's look at the prince before the story and after the story. Can you guys all see the story, by the way? Everyone can still see it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm new to this, to sharing content from my drive, from my phone. It's still very cool to me. So what's the difference between the prince at the beginning of the story, like pre-madness, pre-Turkey stuff, and the prince at the end of the story? Who do we got? Any ideas?
It seems like lots of people care about him at the beginning of the story. He has royal physicians tending to him, and his father is grieving over his behavior.
Let's say before, pre-that.
But before that, okay, before the story.
What's he doing?
Pass.
Okay. Anyone else? There's no wrong answers. It's all. Also, there's probably a billion ways you could read the story, so everything you say is right. Jolie, what do you got?
How the prince was before the story even happened? That's what you're asking?
Yeah, like what was he like before? What was he doing? He was like sitting at the table.
The rules and doing what he was told.
Yeah, he was sitting at the table. He's eating the food. What about the prince after? Jolie, calling on you again because you were just up. What do you think? What was he doing after? What's the difference?
Is he sitting at the table still?
He's sitting at the table again. We've gotten him back at the table. We've gotten him back to eating food. So then what's the difference between before and after?
There's not really much of a difference. He's still doing what he's told.
It would seem like that, right? But in the beginning, he's doing it because he's told to, right? But then at the end, when he still kind of thinks he's a turkey, what would be the difference in the mentality and the psychology of that?
He wants to fix that he's a turkey?
Could be. Okay. Trying to think about that. But I'd say one difference between the beginning and the end is at the beginning, he's doing all these things because he feels compelled to, right? Because those are the rules. And by the end, he's doing all these things because he chooses to. He came to it himself. He came to all these things very much by his own way of identifying himself and acting in his own ways that he doesn't feel confined by. And I think I just mentioned the word identity. I think there's one of the big chidushim of the story, one of the big fundamental ideas, and this is also a fundamental idea in Rav Nachman, I think, is that there's a difference between identity and action. So what does that mean? It means, and it means a lot of things really, but I think it means that sometimes people get caught up in I don't call it identity politics, I don't even know, but they get caught up in the labels of things, in their identity or whatever it is. And they feel that if I'm this type of person, I label myself as this type of person, I can't do those types of actions, or vice versa. Like those X actions are for X type of people, but I don't want to be X type of person. I'm more of a Y type of person. So it doesn't work for me. And that's really not always the case. You know, there's a difference between who I identify, who I feel like I am, but then also what my actions are. It doesn't need to always coincide and be perfectly cookie cutter into whatever I label myself. And I think that's the prince doesn't grow up with these two things as separate, because a prince, when he's living this rigid life in the palace, he's the prince, so he does all these things. He has all these things set out for him, and there's no other way around it, right? He's a prince, so he does this and he does that, and there's no going out to play ball with his friends. There's no I don't know, karate lessons. I don't know. Maybe there is, but only if it's part of the routine, right? But then what he's learning through the sage is slowly, and we see he's going very slowly with all these things. Like first he says, what makes you think you can't be a turkey? And what's the first step? Is pants, right? So wear a shirt. So he goes very slowly, but he's slowly separating this identity and action crisis that he's having. And he's saying, you can still, feel like yourself. You don't need to feel like you were forced to be in this prince role. You can still be whatever you want to be, whether it's a turkey, whether it's a moose, I don't know, whatever. You can just be yourself, but you can still put on a shirt. You can still put on pants. You don't need to feel constricted by this label, by this identity. And we even see it with the wording in their first interaction. The prince has this mentality. He says, "Who are you?" asked the prince. "What are you doing here?" "And you," replied the sage, "what are you doing here?" Right? So if someone says, "What are you doing here?" we would say, I don't know, like I'm here learning, or like I'm here I don't know, schmoozing, or hearing about turkeys, or hearing about getting naked under the table. That's what I wanted to name this year, by the way, but Jacob wouldn't let me. He said it's so that's the real name of this year, getting naked under the table. But on paper, it's called the Turkey Prince. But anyway, so he says, "What are you doing here?" And he says, "I'm a turkey." It'd be like someone asks, like, "What are you guys doing here on this Zoom call?" And we'd be like, "I'm Jewish," right? It's very much like, well, I'm Jewish, so like I have to learn, because like that's what Jewish people do. Like we learn. So because I'm Jewish, I learn. Like I have to. So that's very much the mentality of the prince. Like, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm a turkey. What do you mean? Like, of course I have to be here. Like turkeys. So he feels like I'm a turkey, so I have to sit under the table and be under the table all day. Even though, as we said, a turkey doesn't do that. A turkey does whatever it wants. But he's like still trapped in this lifestyle of identity and action being one. But now he just transferred it over to a turkey. So the sage is saying, I don't care what, like, he's not even so worried that he thinks he's a turkey. It doesn't bother him. It's just, I want you to do the things that you do because you choose to, not because you feel trapped. And that was, as we said, that's kind of his life. He felt trapped. And, he said, my friend Andrew was saying, like, gotta wake up and daven and do all these things. And the prince has that thought, like, I have to be up at 6 a.m. Like, the prince wakes up early because he has to. He's the prince and whatever. And, like, my friend rolls out of bed at 9, and then he goes and he hangs out with his friends on a Sunday morning, play a little basketball, and like he doesn't have to come home for dinner. He can go out and have a movie night. Like it sounds pretty nice. And the king is saying, like, no, like, what do you mean? You're the prince. Like, you have the best life ever. Like, this is the royal life. And he's like, yeah, okay, but I don't know. My friend looks like he's having a good time, and I'm like not so happy in here. He says, no, what do you mean? Like, we for generations we've been kings and princes, and you're fought all these wars to keep this dynasty. But he's just a kid, and he's saying, I don't want this. I didn't choose this. I was just born into this life that I didn't choose, and I'm compelled to do all these things. And I think the sage, unlike all the royal physicians, but the sage, who's the real Rebbe, comes and he understands this prince, where he's coming from, and he's able to get down under the table with him, which is another big lesson in chinuch and education of being able to get down under the table and say, it's okay. I get it. Like you don't feel all this stuff. You don't like all this stuff, but it doesn't mean you need to be out of it completely. And I've interacted with people coming from more the other side, that they didn't grow up in the palace, and they didn't have. By the way, in my head, I'm already rolling with Andrew's connection, which is the amazing connection that he made of obviously the life of Yiddishkeit. We're sons and daughters of the king, and we're living in the palace, and we have that life that we can choose. So when I was saying people who didn't grow up with it, and if I'm on campus, as you guys know, I go to University of Maryland, or I guess I'm done now. It's kind of weird, but I invite people for Shabbos or whatnot, and they'll say, no, like I'm not religious. I'm like, okay, like great, what, like come for Shabbos. Like, no, I'm not religious. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, I'm not religious also. It's come for Shabbos. Like, what's the difference? Because there's no that's the mentality of the sage. Like, you can define yourself as whatever you want, but it shouldn't define the way you act necessarily. You shouldn't be ruled by your definition. You should be ruled by whatever actions are best for you at any given time. And I think the reason this works is because a Yid has this longing for to come close and to live the life in the palace, because the life in the palace is the place we want to be. We want to be with the king. We want to be close to our father, and hopefully we can get there, not by feeling compelled, but by really choosing it for ourselves. And there's a line from Rav Zusha. It's one of my favorite lines. He says the goal of an Oved Hashem is to do every single mitzvah in the Torah just because he chooses to. No other reason, not because reward or someone told me to, whatever. Just because he chooses to. Just because I feel like I just really feel like right now I want to daven. I just really feel like there's kosher, not kosher. It's just like I just inherently, like, just something I just want the kosher. So that's the goal. that's the goal. It's a very lofty level, but I think hopefully with this mindset, we can try to reach that level of serving Hashem just out of our inherent ratzon to do it. So I think I'm out of time, and also I think we're pretty good with this story. But any questions, anything, you guys can follow up with me after, so we don't have to hold everyone. But thank you all for listening.
Yeah. I have a
Thank you.
comment.
Good.
I have a comment. This really resonated with me. Like when I try to do like of changing like the way I speak. Like a lot of times, like the person will say, I have to daven right now, or I have to do these things. And if like we train ourselves to start saying like I get to, even if you're not doing it at that time, it starts to change like your whole like outlook towards doing things that might sometimes be a little bit annoying, but you do the right thing. To train yourself to say like I get to daven, like I get to go, and I get to kind of Burah series with Gil with like a nice big beard and dropping Rav Nachman on fire. You know what I'm saying? But thank you.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I really like that. It's the simple things can really change so much for our whole perspective. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Really great to see all of you.